An irate Coast Guard yells out, "God, no!" as he approaches a distant island to investigate human activity. Throughout his 10 years of service with the United States Army, Lieutenant Riley Beer has seen his share of stressful events. Coast Guard, however, today was intended to be an ordinary patrol of the Pacific, with no special duties whatsoever. Picolot Island, a secluded coral outpost some 160 miles northeast of the main Yap Islands, famed for its pristine beauty and seclusion, will be passed by on their way. Few people ever set foot on the island. Riley made a small course correction, and the plane skimmed over the empty field. A narrow strip of pure white sand separated the water from the sky, and he gazed down at it. At that moment, his attention was drawn to a fleeting movement, barely discernible among the forest background. Riley initially wrote it off, supposing it was probably merely a wayward bird or a light illusion. However, Riley's eyes landed on the beach beyond the forest line as they drew nearer to the coast. In big, frantic letters, a giant SOS was etched into the perfect white sand of the beach. Pointing to Lieutenant Justin Doy, Riley's co-pilot, he said, "Look at that." His voice became abrupt. An SOS. Someone's in trouble down there. As Justin leaned forward to take it all in, his eyes widened. That's no casual message. They're stranded. Or worse. As they swooped down, Riley slowed the helicopter by adjusting the controls. "We'll radio this in and get rescue teams mobilized, but let's get eyes on the situation ourselves first. See if we can spot who we're dealing with." As he reached for the radio, Justin gave a silent nod. Riley could make out more of the motion that had piqued his interest as the plane descended lower. As he got closer to the island's center, he could make out individuals. Riley yelled out to Justin, "Guys, look at this!" as his heart raced and a knot formed in his gut. "There shouldn't be anyone out here," remarked the man. "Picolot Island is supposed to be uninhabited." Their approach made Riley's heart sink. Even from above, the three people's skeletal bodies could be seen out as they furiously waved the island flags. Riley felt a shiver go down her spine at the frantic expressions on their faces and bodies. On the beach, a boat was moored. "Oh my no," he said in shock. "They look like they've been out here for ages." Riley Beer and the crew of the Coast Guard aircraft surveyed the area below as they swooped over Picolot Island. The three survivors, consisting of a lady and two men, were furiously waving in an attempt to attract the notice of their unannounced guests from above. Their frail bodies and worn clothes betrayed the length of time these individuals had been stuck. After Riley's first shock subsided, a tremendous feeling of urgency took hold. Assistance was urgently required by the castaways. More and more disturbing developments on the ground occurred as Riley brought the plane down for a better look. The flat, sandy island provided little cover from the weather, and the thick palm fronds in the middle indicated that their sole shelter was a shack constructed from whatever had washed up on the coast. It was clearly not designed for humans to spend much time there. With a growing sense of resolve, Riley said, "We need to get them off this island, now." Their condition doesn't look good. A cursory survey of the horizon, however, informed him that their mission was going to become much more challenging even as he spoke the words. Above the last 30 minutes, the sky above the water had become more overcast, and Riley could make out the telltale signals of a storm on the horizon. The plane was jolted by the arrival of dark clouds, which were swiftly growing in size and carrying with them strong winds. The shift was also noted by Justin, the co-pilot. As Justin checked the weather radar, he told Riley, "We've got danger coming in from the southwest. There's a fast-moving storm front. Looks like it could be severe." Riley's mouth clenched hard. The question, "How long do we have?" came from him even though he knew the answer. After taking stock of the equipment, Justin tweaked the range of the radar. "We've got maybe 30 minutes before it hits. If we stay much longer, we'll be caught right in the middle of it." He had a terrible look. It's moving faster than expected. As Riley's mind raced, he firmly grasped the controls. Despite the obvious need for immediate assistance, the crew and the trapped individuals below would be in grave danger if they attempted to rescue the castaways in the midst of deteriorating weather conditions. If the aircraft already facing severe gusts, lowering a winch would be very difficult, if not impossible. The seas around the island were also increasing as the storm drew near, ruling out the possibility of a water landing. Even if they could, The weather would prevent them from sending the helicopters needed for a safe rescue. "Drop a radio and emergency supplies," Riley instructed. "We need to get them stabilized until we can come back." Bundling food, drink, medical equipment, and a two-way radio tightly, the team swiftly created a package to endure the drop. Riley brought the plane into a low hover over a level area of the island, and then the crew unloaded the cargo. The castaways hurried ahead to pick it up when it struck the sand not far away. A voice crackled over the radio as the three guys ripped open the box. Riley, whose uneasiness was palpable, anxiously said, "Can you hear us?" into his microphone. The response was weak and shaky. "We hear you. Thank you. Please, help us." Riley kept his voice calm as he added, "We're the U.S. Coast Guard," despite the agitation in his voice. "We're here to help, but we've got bad weather rolling in. We have to return to base, but we'll be back for you as soon as the storm passes. We've dropped emergency supplies to get you through the night: food, water, and a medical kit." Static interrupted the subsequent quiet. After a while, the desperate sound of the same voice returned. "No, don't leave us, please! We've been here for 33 days, eating whatever we can catch, rats, conches, and drinking rainwater. But Rita's blood sugar is very low. We need help, please." Riley felt a knot of shame develop in his gut as he swallowed. With a strain in his voice, he continued, "We have no choice. The storm is closing in, and it's too dangerous to conduct a rescue right now. We will come back for you." The impending storm became more apparent. As the winds became stronger, the plane lurched, and Riley could make out the castaways stumbling as the first raindrops hit the beach. The air was heavy with the impending storm, and the temperature dropped precipitously. "Riley, we absolutely must leave," Justin said with an air of urgency. "Visibility is about to drop, and we won't be able to navigate safely if we don't get ahead of this." Riley paused briefly, his gaze locked on the individuals below, who clung on to the supplies. After that, he steered the plane away from the island with some reluctance. The little patch of land was obscured when he looked back and saw the black clouds swoop in like a cloak. Shortly after, a hard and severe rain arrived, obstructing sight of the ocean below. He felt a growing feeling of powerlessness. Although it was wrong, the storm forced them to abandon the castaways. Attempting to drop a rescue winch in such treacherous circumstances would have been completely irresponsible, since the unpredictable whipping of the wire rendered it impossible to attach someone securely. Doing a lifting operation may have sent a castaway or crew member into the water, or perhaps the plane's side. The 500-mile return flight to Guam's Andersen Air Force Base was a mental rerun for Riley, who kept seeing the helpless people on the ground, their calls for rescue muffled by the static. He was burdened by more than simply the technical difficulties caused by the storm. The human element came into play when he realized that 3 individuals were battling for their lives while he had just taken flight. Riley took comfort in the fact that they had ensured the castaways had sufficient provisions to survive the night. The next day, plans were already in motion to deploy more patrols and backup helicopters. The plane finally landed 3 hours later, just as the rain started pelting the airfield's windows. Riley descended from the cockpit, his face beaten raw by the biting cold wind. He was prepared to spend the next few hours lying awake, haunted by the thought that 3 lives, alone on that lonely island, were hanging precariously in the air while they braved the storm on their own. Riley kept seeing the disturbing sight of the helpless humans pleading for rescue. He couldn't understand how they'd managed to stay alive for so long in that dangerous place. Extreme heat, lack of food, and exposure to the elements were all situations alluded to in the radio broadcast. Every day he thought about how hard it must have been for them to get enough food to stay alive. As he detailed the castaways' situation, he informed the crew, who listened attentively. Justin disapproved and declined. "It's incredible they've survived this long at all. The heat, the lack of fresh water, it would have broken most people." While planning a complete rescue for the next day, the Coast Guard was getting ready to dispatch aircraft to keep an eye on the island overnight, delivering more supplies if needed. Now we knew for sure. We had to evacuate those individuals off the island immediately. Riley tossed and turned all night long. His thoughts kept returning to the frantic scene on the island as he lay on his bunk. His mind wandered to the castaways and how they had managed to stay alive for so long, only by depending on their own determination. Every time the sky became darker, it must have been a constant reminder that help would never arrive. and they must have been scared. A little breeze fluttered through the trees as Riley awoke after a restless night and made his way to the airstrip. He saw a helicopter coming back from a supply run, its pilot looking exhausted as he stepped out of the plane. "They're hanging in there," the pilot saw, "but just barely. We need to get them out first thing tomorrow." It was as if Riley were experiencing a growing sense of urgency as the hours ticked by. The castaways' frail health and the island's rough terrain made a successful rescue an unlikely possibility. Every little thing has to be just so. When Riley and the team awoke the next morning, the weather had cleared up sufficiently to begin the rescue mission. As it reached Pikelot Island, the helicopter swooped low over the turbulent water, the wind buffeting the craft. Riley braced himself for the perilous mission ahead, his fists clenching the controls. The castaways seemed even more vulnerable in the bright sunlight as the chopper circled over the island. The garments they wore drooped like rags, and they had pale complexions and sunken eyes. As Riley watched the lady walk slowly and unsteadily forward, his pulse raced. The winch was lowered, and a harness was sent down to save each individual. The first guy was lifted up, his hands shaking with fatigue, clinging to the harness. He was exhausted and breathing shallowly when the helicopter crew hoisted him inside. The lady arrived thereafter. As Riley fought to get herself into the harness, her heart rate increased. Because she was clumsy and moved slowly, the team had to lower the winch with extra caution. Lifted into the air, she seemed quite weightless, a delicate figure teetering on the brink of existence. Upon reaching the helicopter, the medical staff wasted no time in assessing her condition and providing urgent care. As the winch swung up and down, the final guy was hoisted up with a shaky body. He landed on the floor of the chopper with bloodshot, watery eyes, yet a little grin appeared on his face as he said, "Thank you." En route to the shore, the chopper raced with its priceless cargo. As the doctors attempted to stabilize the castaways, Riley remained nearby to observe their health. The woman's condition was critical. She was still breathing shallowly and had a faint pulse. In order to elevate her blood sugar, the medical staff monitored her vitals closely and gave her glucose. As they gently drank water to restore some power, the other two guys lay on stretchers. One of the guys attempted to describe what had happened to them, but his voice was rough and strained. "We got caught in a storm and lost a lot of fuel weathering it. We drifted. We thought we were going to die." Riley grimaced and nodded. "You're safe now. We'll get you to a hospital." The sight of the shore brought Riley a sense of comfort as they drew closer to the mainland. Eventually, the castaways would get the medical attention they sorely needed, and their ordeal would be finished. As soon as the chopper landed at the hospital, medical staff members hurried to greet the patients. With his gaze fixed on the lady, Riley assisted in transferring the castaways to stretchers. The medics reassured him that she was stable, even though she was barely aware. "The fact that they survived is beyond comprehension," one of the physicians said as he shook his head in astonishment. A gradual recuperation at the hospital started for the castaways in the days that followed. Riley paid them a visit in the hopes of learning more about their tragedy. Very little was known about the horrific tale. Thus, many questions remained unsolved despite the little information. They detailed their ordeal of setting sail from Pulap Atoll to Puluwat Atoll in a 23-foot skiff, only to be derailed due to a lack of fuel. They eventually sought safety on little deserted Pikelot Island, some 125 miles from where they had set off. They had improvised a shelter and subsisted for weeks on a diet of wild game and insects. Keeping going had been an uphill struggle every day, and they had doubts about their ability to succeed on occasion. As the woman's health deteriorated, the guys were left to tend to her in the best way they knew how. Their tenacity impressed Riley greatly as he listened. Their ability to persevere in the face of overwhelming adversity is an inspiration to all who witness it. The fact that they had held on to optimism in the face of adversity was crucial. While Riley was unconcerned with the details, the United States Border Patrol persisted with their investigation into the castaways' voyage. It was sufficient that he had intervened to save other people in danger. The rescue would be a defining moment for Riley Beer and his team for many years. It was the sight of 3 weak bodies waving from an empty island that had a profound effect on them, reminding us that even the tiniest clues may lead to monumental bravery. It was a remarkable tale of rescue and the indomitable human spirit. Could you have maintained your life on this island? For what reasons? Post your thoughts in the space provided. I appreciate you tuning in. Until we meet again.